Welcome to the Heroic Investing Show. As first responders, we risk our lives every day. Our financial security is under attack. Our pensions are in a state of emergency. A single on-duty incident can alter or erase our earning potential instantly and forever. We are the heroes of society. We are self-reliant and we need to take care of our own financial future. The Heroic Investing Show is our toolkit of business and investing tactics on our mission to financial freedom.
Hello and welcome to episode 150 of the Heroic Investing Show. This is a podcast for first responders, members of the military, veterans, and anyone looking to improve their financial future and gain some freedom with their time. We teach America's heroes how to build passive income, build their startup business, spark that entrepreneurial fire, and safely grow wealth through real estate and other alternative investments. My name is Gary Pinkerton, and I co-host this show with Jason Hartman. On this 10th episode, like Jason does on most of his different podcasts, we go off topic. This one isn't that far off topic, though. This is Jason interviewing Peter Shallard, who is owner of a company called The Shrink for Entrepreneurs. And Peter describes himself as a business psychology expert and therapist gone renegade, who works with all types of entrepreneurs around the globe as they strive to reach greater goals of wealth, freedom, and social impact. And it's that social impact side that really inspired me and interested me, and I think is the one that will help tie things certainly to my message, to my goals, but also to what is interesting to all of you that listen to the Heroic Investing Show week after week. And thanks again so much for doing that. I'd love to hear, though, if you disagree, and then please do reach out to me at gary@pinkerton.com. So his obsession on that social impact part is with the pursuit of for-profit businesses, so to kind of promote for-profit businesses, owners who are interested in those, that also make a positive change in the world. So he wants to help entrepreneurs create businesses that will benefit the world. So think Steve Jobs, think Bill Gates. Those guys put the internet in everyone's fingertips and then put it in your pocket, right? So amazing, amazing changes to the world. It caused people to be able to wake up. It caused fake media to be much harder to do. It caused oppression to be hard. It gave people in all corners of the earth the ability to dream, to be inspired about what is out there and how low the barrier to success really is. So I agree with him. This is really what inspires me too. And, he talks about helping his clients rapidly reprogram mental habits, shed light on what's holding you back to provide insights and helping you make sense of people in new, meaningful ways, understand your product better, understand what the need is out there better, and ignite powerful motivation and consistent drive for long-term stamina so your success grows exponentially. And it's that part of playing an infinite game, as Simon Sinek says, and as outlasting others that I want to drill a little bit more down into. And he does so in the interview. And as part of the interview, he talks about, the people that really inspire him and that are making a big difference out there in the world are those that start to develop some value or attraction or fascination with the game of actually just building the businesses themselves. You see examples of this throughout history where people have more money than they need and they have the opportunity to quit, but they don't. They continue to re-innovate. They continue to lead the market and change the market. People who come to mind, right? So he talks about Colonel Sanders. So the founder of Kentucky Fried Chicken did it in his 60s, mid-60s. And he did it out of need, which is the cause of many businesses. He had one little chicken restaurant and he got rave reviews, but he didn't have inspiration to go big until the city came in and put a highway right on top of it and bulldozed down his property. And so that caused him to innovate, right? It put him in his uncomfort zone. And this is a guy that, I'm in my 40s and I remember him, the real gray-haired Colonel Sanders, on TV doing commercials. The guy would never quit. And it was inspiring as a kid to see that. Walt Disney, same thing. Sam Walton, there's a great example, right? Richest guy in America at the time, on earth maybe, and he never stopped. Throughout the ages, never stopped. Warren Buffett, very similar, right? So these people, there's, John D. Rockefeller, another great example. The guy would never give up the reins, and sometimes that's bad for legacy, but it's inspiring. And the real question is, why did they do it, right? And it's because they were doing what Simon Sinek says, which is play in the infinite game. They weren't out to make a bunch of money. They weren't out to make one iPhone. They were out to continually innovate and change the world and make a social change and to, like I said, improve the world, the lives of other people. And because of that, they became ultra wealthy. So what about Simon Sinek's infinite game? That's one of the things that really inspires me. And, it provides some great motivation for us. And I think specifically for people who are veterans of service. So firefighters, police officers, EMTs, members of the military. I continually try to urge you and point out other individuals with podcasts and books and programs that are helping you understand that this is not very hard and that you are uniquely positioned to succeed. So if you look out there and go look at the studies on how many members of the military, veterans, and of firefighting and police have led businesses, have become CEOs and successful government and business owners. And you'll find it's a tremendous number. It's a large percentage. And I believe it's because of that outlast the other guy thing. So Simon Sinek comments that one of the key attributes of a leader is that you get up one more time than the other guys do, right? It reminds me of Napoleon Hill's story, 3 Feet from Gold. It's a separate book, but it's an excerpt really of Think and Grow Rich. And it's this gentleman who, not uncommon for the day, sells everything he has, moves out for the gold rush, finds a hint that he's on the right track, comes back, borrows money from everyone he knows, sells his home, everything this time, moves back out there, uses all this brand new drilling equipment and digs and digs and digs and finds basically nothing. He's completely bankrupt, given up, and sells his stuff to a junk dealer. Junk dealer has no idea, nowhere near as much ability even as the guy who just sold him the equipment. Certainly no experience. He does a really smart thing. He asks a professional surveyor to come and take a look and tell him what he thinks. And the gentleman looks at the small veins that had been discovered and where the dig was and where in the part of the hills it was and knew the area well. And he says, you're very close. And so that inspired the guy to dig a little more. He goes 3 feet further as the story goes and strikes one of the largest gold discoveries in history. And the story really has two morals or two themes, I would think. It's not giving up when you're 3 feet from gold, right? That's the obvious one with the title. But the other one is seeking professional advice. This guy, knew he didn't know anything. How many times have we been in that scenario, right? And now the ability to seek professional advice the barrier is very low. You can meet with professionals without having to get on an airplane and go meet them in person. And so I push you to consider doing that. In my story, my participation of the book, The One Thing That Changed Everything, Amazon #1 bestseller back in April, where we were talking about, what we had learned. And one of the things that I had learned is that sharing unique genius is what's going to bring America back to greatness. But in there, one of my lessons and realizations was that the only scarce thing on earth is time. The only scarce thing for people is time. So, I've tried to create a little urgency there, but what I'm really saying is that look throughout your life, and I'm guilty of this too, and find things that really are not in your wheelhouse. Maybe you're good at them, but they're not the thing that you're better than everybody else at. I'm really good at mowing my lawn, but I can pay somebody else to do as good a job, or even if it's only 80% of my job, that frees me up to go do those things that I am better at than everybody else. So unique genius, right? Focus on unique genius and remember that time is the scarce resource. So seek professional help and seek coaches and people who can get you focused. And I think that Peter Shallard is one of those guys. So in a moment, we're going to shift over and talk with these two. And this is really a fascinating interview. I want to just remind you, though, that we have some really, really good upcoming new episodes and some other great best of the best from Jason from Creating Wealth shows and some of his other shows. I'm also bringing in now some interviews about short-term rentals. My wife, Sue, and I got our first one, and we're starting to look into this. Obviously, we're a little bit later than the early adopters, but there's still a long way to go in the Airbnb and short-term rental world. So stay tuned for those. And without further ado, please enjoy. I think you're really going to like this discussion between Jason Hartman and Peter Shallard from The Shrink for Entrepreneurs.
It's my pleasure to welcome Peter Shallard to the show. He is known as the Shrink for Entrepreneurs, and he's got a rather renowned business psychology angle on things, and he likes to say he's a therapist gone renegade. So we'll talk about how to achieve success as an entrepreneur and some very interesting recent blog posts that he's done. Peter, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Good. Well, it's good to have you, and you're coming to us today from the Big Apple, New York City.
That's right, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I became interested in your work when I read a couple of your blog posts, and one of them was about the dangers of becoming superhuman and how being over-optimized can really hurt us and be a disadvantage. And another one that really interested me was on emotional intelligence. And then the concept of another one on having tons of potential and why that can actually be a disadvantage to people. So I want to dive into those. But before we do that, I just generally thought from your practice, you call it, I think, the clarity couch or something like that, which is the tell us about your childhood type of thing. Lay back on the Freudian couch there.
Right.
And wanted to ask you, what do you see as some of the things entrepreneurs are really doing wrong, Peter, and then some of the things they're doing right?
That's a really big question. It's a good one though. I'm focused on the mindset pretty much exclusively. I work with people, with entrepreneurs, right at the place where their thinking and their behavior caused by their thinking intersects with their business's bottom line. And I guess the mistakes, if I was to say that there were mistakes that people are making, they're kind of the kind of the mistakes that people make as a result of their psychology, really being in development, really being in a phase of kind of growth. There's certain things that we all have to figure out in life. And when we throw those psychological issues up against a business, we're forced to figure them out in order to produce business results, to progress the business forward. So specifically, I kind of come up against emotional baggage. That has to be the first category. Is when an entrepreneur or someone who's aspiring to be an entrepreneur has had things happen in their life where there's been a lot of negative emotions, a lot of kind of trauma, quote unquote. When they're running their business, they might encounter situations that are similar to that thing that happened to them in the past that caused them to freeze up or kind of become paralyzed in some ways. So I think that having those kind of psychological blind spots is often a huge deal. It's a thing that it's a mistake that people make in the sense that they don't realize running a business is basically running a self-development machine. Businesses exist primarily to make profit, in the capitalistic sense. But I like to say that businesses are human growing machines because they take the founder, the entrepreneur, and force them through all of these kind of cathartic processes where it's sort of survival of the fittest. You have to wise up. Your thinking has to change and evolve. You have to overcome those negative emotions from your past. You have to overcome limiting beliefs and really identify the capability gaps that you have and fill them. That's the so I don't like to think of like general mistakes that every entrepreneur makes that I notice. But if I think about what trends I do see in people who are kind of figuring it out, it's developing that self-awareness to be able to look at yourself, look at your past, look at where you've come from, and see what kind of limitations are there in my thinking or in your thinking around your beliefs, around your capabilities, on what you're really capable of achieving, and around your behavior. Are you disciplined enough to be successful? Are you doing the right things on a daily basis to be successful? And I think developing that ability to really truly and honestly see yourself is, when it's lacking, that's the biggest mistake anyone can make. And when it's there, I think it's one of the number one causes for success, being able to see those capability gaps. Does that kind of make sense?
Sure it does. Does that go back to the concept of we don't know what we don't know and how that puts us at a disadvantage?
Well, I think that regular civilians don't know what they don't know. But the great
regular civilians.
Yeah, right. The great thing about running a business is that very rapidly, as you and I both know, very rapidly your business will teach you what you don't know. It'll point it out with like a flashing neon sign and be like, "This, my friend, is an area that you need to work on." And I think that's what's great about kind of committing to that journey of building a business. And I think that that's something to focus on that a lot of entrepreneurs can kind of get distracted from. Like your number one job as an entrepreneur is you're the asset. You're the number one asset of your business. Certainly when you're starting out, you might be the only asset that your business has. So you need to identify any of the weaknesses. You need to figure out, are there areas in my kind of capability and skill set that are holding the business back? Are there areas where kind of my belief maybe about what I'm capable of, maybe my self-confidence is holding the business back? And I think one of the most obvious places that we see this in small businesses is sales, when the founder, the CEO, the entrepreneur is involved in actually selling their own product or services. All of that psychological stuff can really get in the way.
Yeah, that's true. When you talked about, you made the remark, it was kind of funny, about regular civilians not seeing their weaknesses, but as an entrepreneur, the marketplace will point them out to us usually rather quickly.
Exactly.
And that right there, Peter, is a huge testimonial for why capitalism and free market systems work so well, because we get feedback pretty quickly, and we can iterate and we can make course corrections and do that. Whereas in government, people can work for 4 decades and they don't care about feedback. There's no real feedback because the marketplace, because it operates on no rules. I mean, when you can print your own money ad infinitum, and you don't have to have a budget that works, or a system that works, or a product people want, or anything, it just doesn't work. I mean, it's dysfunctional, non-working things can perpetuate almost indefinitely.
Absolutely. And I think, the civilian joke, it's kind of like a term I use to just kind of joke around about people who aren't entrepreneurs, who aren't on that journey. And I think there is a very big line in the sand. Even people who are just working, the traditional 9-to-5 corporate job, when you're working for a large organization and the buck doesn't necessarily stop with you, you're not the person who's ultimately accountable, the founder, the CEO, whatever. You're kind of in a place where there's a lot of things that could go wrong. If you're not performing, let's say you're a salesperson working for a Fortune 500 company. If you're not performing, you may be able to say, well, hey, like the product delivery guys are letting me down and I don't have faith in them. So I'm not able to go out and sell consistently. I don't, there's something wrong with this company. It's not my fault, right? So there's all that kind of dialogue that can happen that, and does happen, to be quite honest. There's a lot of people who they have reasons why they can't produce success. When you're an entrepreneur, the only thing that you produce is results. There's no reasons, there's no rationale. It's like it's a result, and it's either a good one or a bad one. So you can't say like, oh, the product delivery side of my small business is letting my sales team down because you're talking about yourself. You have to quickly figure it out. And that's what's great about the entrepreneurial journey, is that if something is wrong with your business, the results you get will point that out to you. It's kind of like radar. It's like a homing system that will zero in on and say, here's what you need to work on. Here's what you need to fix. And I think it is possible. You asked me about mistakes, which I think it's just a fascinating question, what mistakes people make. And I think that the biggest mistake, and it is possible for people to do this, is to ignore that market feedback. Is for people to really not pay attention to the results that they're getting and kind of keep striving away, trying to do the same thing, trying to maybe develop the same product that there never really was interest in the market for that product, or some example like that. So yeah, having the perception is really important to know when we're getting that feedback, and what we need to change is I think, that's the key to psychological clarity. That's why entrepreneurs do well to pay attention to their thinking and everything that's going on between their ears.
Yeah, no question about it. So where is the difference, and where does the distinction lie between the concept you just mentioned, where we're talking about getting feedback, not passing the buck, being accountable, making course corrections, constantly iterating, and giving the market what they want, giving the marketplace what they want through that iteration. And the difference between, we've all heard lots of stories about famous entrepreneurs who kept doing something, kept banging their head against the wall. They were incredibly persistent. They overcame incredible odds because, and the only reason we hear their story is because they ultimately became successful. Like Tom Peters, I think he was the one who said, the only thing that ever, the only person that ever achieves anything great is a monomaniac with a mission. And the concept of the Colonel Sanders story, over 1,000 times he was rejected. The marketplace kept telling him no, but he believed believed so deeply that he would be a success that he just kept on keeping on. And ultimately he was. At what point do we decide, okay, the market is telling me this is not the plan. I'm getting feedback here and I need to change my course, quit, give up, go back to my corporate job in the cubicle, whatever it is. Or I just need to be so persistent and keep going.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I think that this is why the whole kind of lean startup and agile business building methodology has become so popular recently, because those methodologies exist as a framework. They offer people a framework for validating their ideas in a way that you can kind of believe in. Like, you can sort of believe that you're doing it the right way, you're iterating and testing the right way. And I think that that's a huge problem. Is what you're talking about is kind of the dichotomy between just continuing to iterate and change what you're doing and test things out until something takes, versus trying to make your thing work and then maybe just giving up because the market doesn't want what you have. I think that it's the difference between entrepreneurs. Like, that dichotomy is the difference between somebody who's obsessed with building a business and somebody who's obsessed with bringing a product to market. And I think that there are success stories on both sides of that fence, but it's the odds of bringing the product to market are much on that side. It's a much riskier kind of prospect. It's kind of like trying to be an artist, just really believing your paintings are the best and hopefully everybody else recognizes them for the genius that they are. In the case of Colonel Sanders, he had really good chicken, so I think that really helped. But we don't hear the stories, we don't hear quotes or interesting inspirational stories about all of the people who believed in themselves relentlessly but had bad chicken, and so it never really got anywhere and kind of ended up giving up or leaving this planet in one way, shape, or form, feeling massively unsatisfied. And I think that there's millions of stories like that. There's very, very few people who have some product, something that they really want to birth into the world, and they show up with it, instantly hit a home run, and then kind of rocket their, just enjoy their retirement. You know what I mean? Doesn't happen that often. I think that there's always some form of iteration. There's always some packaging. There's something that has to be changed. And I think that, I certainly encourage my clients to also start to develop a love for the game itself, start to develop some value, some sort of like attraction and fascination with the game of actually building businesses themselves. I've known very few entrepreneurs who, at the kind of the peak, the summit of their career in the golden years, are actually more kind of passionate and obsessed with the product or whatever their business is about, the chicken, let's say, in the Colonel Sanders example, than they are kind of obsessed with the structure, with the economy, with the business that they've built around it. And I think that that's where that iterative focus and that whole philosophy lies. And I think that's where entrepreneurs really create massive success, is where they become obsessed with playing the game. You know what I mean? With sort of building the thing. And then actually we get entrepreneurs who arrive at a place in their career where they've made some successful business around selling chicken. They've fallen in love with the process of building that business. Then they realize that they can build a whole other business. They can jump sideways and build another huge, great big empire. But instead of chicken, it's like yo-yos, or it's something on the internet, or I don't know, it could be anything. And at that point, you've got a true entrepreneur, somebody who's about the game of business rather than about the chicken.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting distinction there. Well, as I was mentioning to you before we started, I had Stephen Kotler on the show before, and I just finished his book, The Rise of Superman. I bought it originally, Peter, not knowing what it was about, really, or in detail. I just thought it was going to be about super health and super optimization and that kind of stuff. But it was more about extreme sports and things like that, which is kind of interesting. But what intrigued me is that you wrote a blog post about the dangers of becoming superhuman and how to avoid the over-optimized entrepreneur syndrome. And, this is a popular topic nowadays. There are all kinds of websites like, Life Hacker and websites, the Bulletproof Executive, about hacking your body, hacking the system, optimizing everything, multitasking. We just want to do this, as entrepreneurs. Instinctually, this all sounds great. There's a dark side, you're saying?
Yeah, and I think that the article that I wrote caused some controversy, and I think that I want to kind of establish that I don't think that aiming to be Superman is necessarily a bad goal. I think it's the way people are approaching those goals that is kind of hurting their chances. And that article, the reason that it really resonated was that a ton of my clients are wrestling with this stuff. So when that one went to press, I was sort of typing out an article based on the session that I had the hour before with one of my clients, and with about a dozen of them. This is a really massive problem. It's something that's happening all over the place. I would say it's particularly if there's a kind of a bell curve, I think that the majority of people who have this problem are younger male entrepreneurs who are having this kind of superhuman pressure happen in their lives. And what it is it's the desire to have optimization in every area of their lives. So business success, number one, first and foremost. Health success, got to have the six pack or the flat stomach or whatever. You've got to have a great relationship, like an inspirational relationship. Your significant other should be blowing all of your friends away with their awesomeness. In some cases, people who have kids, you have to be raising these Mensa level genius children at the same time. Spirituality, you should have a meditation habit on top of all of that. And there's nothing wrong with aiming to have genius children, six-pack abs, a multi-million-dollar successful business, and if not, billion-dollar business, and all of that. But the problem is reaching for it all at the same time. That's the dark side of it, where I see entrepreneurs tearing themselves up because they're blowing through their own expectations. They're failing to meet these massive expectations they have because they're reaching in so many different directions at once. In the article, I talk about a psychological concept called splitting, which is basically all or nothing thinking. And for entrepreneurs, the way that manifests is that they say, this is my goal, to be superhuman in all these different areas. And then they split the goal. They have this black or white, all or nothing thinking, where if they're not at 100% of that goal, they're failures. And so I'm working with guys who are independently, like they're massively successful. They're phenomenally wealthy. They have phenomenal relationships. Lots of stuff is great, but like maybe they had a couple of pizzas in the last week because they were working really hard on their business or whatever, and they feel terrible about themselves. They feel like a failure because they're not optimized in every sphere of life. And the point of the article, and certainly like my professional advice for people who are wrestling with this, is to recognize that all of the people who we look at now as superhuman, and there's a lot of business leaders who are speaking at conferences and, they're kind of publishing New York Times bestselling books and stuff who are like that. I think Richard Branson is the classic example of someone who billionaire, genius, playboy, philanthropist, you know what I mean? Like he's the whole package, right? Those guys didn't get there by doing it all at once. They built these things incrementally in their life. So what I encourage people to do is like pick one or two or maybe three areas in your life and focus on optimizing those incrementally. You know what I mean? Don't put the expectation on yourself that while you're building. I had a client, I think I mentioned this in the article. I had a client who was at the most critical year of, if not the most critical quarter of the most critical year of his business, in a sense that he had run a massive kind of pre-selling campaign, had raised tons and tons of money, and had to deliver big time for all of these customers who had been pre-sold on the product that he was pitching them. So he had huge pressure. Now, if I was that guy, like I would focus on doing that pretty much first and foremost. But he was also trying to get the six pack. He was like ruthlessly juicing and cleansing and working out. He was also telling himself, now that everything's optimized with the business and he's in the zone, it's time to start dating again and meet that dream girl. And like, there's all this other stuff going on. And it's just kind of like, dude, this is not how anyone built their superhuman empire. You've got to do it one brick at a time, incrementally. And when you've got the super successful business and it's operating and it's optimized, then you're going to have the psychological bandwidth to take on another goal and, then get the six pack or whatever, like I think that's really the point, is that the article was a big psychological explanation and ultimately a call for like moderate incremental success strategies, because The alternative is these guys set these unrealistic goals. They have black and white, all or nothing thinking. They don't accomplish them because you can't do everything at once. So they kind of flame out. And in some cases, the tragedy is they'll quit altogether because they just feel it's too difficult. And then the world loses another cool business. The world loses another cool entrepreneur, right? And ultimately, that's the point. That's what I'm getting at.
Okay. Well, so I remember Stephen Covey the late Stephen Covey, talking about seasonal imbalance. So if this is the season where you really got to just shut everything out of your life and work on your business, for example, it's a critical time. Or this is the season where you've really got to work on your relationship or your fitness level. I mean, is that what you're saying? Kind of work on one thing at a time, but don't we want to always sort of balance everything out? You know, like if you're working hard in your business, shouldn't you be going to the gym too? Or
Yeah, and I guess what I'm saying is that I think that if you have balance, you have to set the goal, like you have to have incremental goals. You can't have the expectation of I want to be a multimillionaire, but your business is only making a few $1,000s a month, and I want to have a six pack, but you're like 40 pounds overweight or whatever, or even 10, 20 pounds overweight. You can't have goals in that area that you're massively reaching for and then be working on all of those reaching in a huge way all at the same time. There has to be, like, you have to reel in you have to find balance. Absolutely. You have to find that moderation. So I know people who are ruthlessly committed to business. Their ambition knows no bounds. They're relentless and they're successful in accomplishing their ambitions because that's pretty much all they focus on. Do I want that life? No, I love balance too much. I want to be able to go to the gym. I want to find time to be present in my relationship as well. I want all of these other things, but I think that there's no real prescription. I think that everybody gets to decide what their balance is, but what's important is sustainability, so that because building business success takes time, living a life well lived takes time. So you don't want to flame out. And that's really the point of, that's kind of my concern around the superhuman movement, is that the pressure that people put themselves on. Entrepreneurs are notorious for having enormously high expectations for themselves. But this life hacking movement has kind of upped the ante with that, to the point that I see remarkably talented people who are capable of changing the planet flaming out early before they really do their best work, because they're putting so much pressure on themselves, not just to have balance in their life, but to have every single sphere of life, spoke on the wheel of life, category, whatever you want to call it, at like 110% at all times. And realistically, that's not how you get there. It may be possible. I think it's debatable. Can you be at 100% in every part of your life at once? Maybe you can. Maybe Richard Branson is. I don't know. I don't know the guy personally, but I think that you have to get there step by step by step.
Well, I think part of the Branson thing, and I spent some time with Richard Branson. I went to Necker Island about a year ago and hung out with him a little bit. And, one of the things I take from him is that, and from reading his books too, is that part of his whole business model was, yes, he wanted to do great things and change industries, and, obviously he succeeded in doing that. But part of the whole model was having fun, making it, his brand is a fun brand. The whole concept of the Virgin brand is really fun, is just part of its personality.
Right on.
And so when we talk about, okay, he's living a big life and traveling and being a playboy and all that kind of stuff, that's really part of the business model.
Right, absolutely. I mean, in some cases, it's literally part of the brand. It's part of his marketing expenses, to pay for the party, because they film it, and then it's part of the whole cachet around how, Richard Branson is this playboy. So absolutely, I think that really serves to kind of prove the point in some ways, that there has to be focus on fun. There has to be that kind of balance. I think that a lot of entrepreneurs wrestle with, do I ease up on myself? Do I allow myself to have that fun? Do I have the night off? Do I take do I go to that party? Do I have the fun? I mean, and I'm talking about people I work with are all incredibly high-performing individuals. There is this internal kind of wrestling match that they do with themselves. And I think that the drive to be superhuman often takes them in the other direction. It takes them towards like work harder, be more disciplined. You're not there yet. You're failing miserably at all of these areas. You're not being superhuman. An interesting example of the fun thing, I spent some time with Tim Ferriss recently, and he was talking about like some of his realizations post 4-hour work week. Now that book sort of years in the past, was really around the importance of, aside from the business hacking strategies to get your business to the point that it's optimized and all that kind of stuff, and you don't have to spend so much time on it. He's really noticed the importance of stressing, hey, like you're supposed to actually fill up all of that extra time that you have with the work, like the mini vacations, going and doing fun stuff, living like doing extreme adventure sports and having a really great time, basically traveling and being on vacation. The reason that that's so important is he's noticed people will read the 4-hour work week, they'll implement the principles, and then they'll fill all of the extra available time they have with more work. Because that's what entrepreneurs do. That's like a unique thing about entrepreneurs, about the entrepreneurial mind, is that the entrepreneurial brain will fill all available time with work if it's given the chance. And I think that I think that this makes for this kind of burnt out, like hypermanic, aspiring to be superhuman entrepreneur thing. And I think when Richard Branson is successful, not despite partying, but perhaps because he's been partying, maybe we need to look at that and bring some of that balance into our quest to be superhuman.
Yeah. Peter, I like what you said. I'm looking at the comments on that blog post, and one of the things you said to one of your readers is you said that all or nothing usually results in nothing. And I think that's a very good point. So they're either make the thing, the other thing, like the fun example, part of the brand, or, just understand that there will be seasonal imbalance, and you do this and then you do something else, work on the next part of it. As long as you don't totally neglect one thing as you're doing something else, because then it will completely go away, like fitness, because it's really hard if you get up to 300 pounds, it's really hard to reverse that and fix it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with one of my clients who was wrestling with this, and we were actually joking about the old mockumentary Spinal Tap. I don't know if you've seen it, but there's this whole joke about turning the amp up to 11, like most amps only go up to 10, but my one goes up to 11. This is this whole joke. And I said to him, I was like, you can't live your life with like 4 or 5 switches or 6 or whatever in front of you, spirituality, relationships, health, business, and turn them all up to 11, because you'll do that and then you won't be able to maintain it, and you might be able to be that disciplined for about 2.5 days before you'll totally collapse and be like, I just need to sit on the couch, watch Netflix and order a pizza, and which is not really serving any of those kind of life categories. In my experience, and I've worked with a lot of massively successful entrepreneurs, I've seen their kind of climb, their meteoric rise to that level of success. It starts with people with the dials down wherever they're realistically at in your life, and then you turn one up and you feel what that balance is like and what life is like, kind of putting a bit more juice into the business. And then you maybe turn up the health juice a little bit, and then you kind of are like, oh, that was a bit much, I should ease back a little bit. And it's just this tweaking game, and slowly but surely you learn things, you become smarter, you wise up about the ways of the world and how businesses are run, and you keep turning up the switches, and then maybe you become Richard Branson and you have everything turned up to 11, including partying. But it's that incremental approach to building success rather than setting out to be superhuman from day one. And like I said, this is a symptom of typically like younger entrepreneurs who actually haven't yet built massive multi-billion-dollar empires. So the problem is overzealous expectations, and then when the results inevitably come in a little bit under those overzealous expectations, these people get very depressed, and that's the part that really bothers me. It's like it's so unnecessary. They're killing it. They should be feeling great about it. Why not be happy and enjoy success rather than being miserable because you're never quite superhuman enough?
Very good. Thanks. Hey, I want to try and ask you about 2 more topics with our limited time here. So one is about emotional intelligence. A lot has been written about that. What is emotional intelligence, and how will it make or break business success? And, how do you get more of it?
Emotional intelligence is a huge topic, but let's talk about it. Let's define it in terms of like how it's relevant to entrepreneurs. So I do a huge amount of work in this space, and I think that emotional intelligence is the ability of an entrepreneur to be able to take that sometimes confusing mess of input, like the things that we feel as we're operating in the world, and really make sense of them and use those emotional feedback kind of inputs as tools to make decisions. So there's kind of a saying that decisiveness is everything in business. And I definitely agree. Being an entrepreneur, certainly once you start building your organization, working with staff, being a leader, that type of thing, everything is about making rapid decisions. The quicker that you can make, the faster, the person who makes the fastest good decisions is the person who wins in business, period, right? That is the name of the game. And so being able to make rapid decisions is not about being able to run through complex frameworks and lattices and matrices of logic. It's about being able to make gut intuition work for you. It's about being able to make intuitive decisions. That's how we make our quickest decisions in business, to go left or right at that key tactical crossroads. So emotional intelligence is the thing, or lack of emotional intelligence is the thing that prevents entrepreneurs making good gut decisions. So when you don't have emotional intelligence, you don't know what you're feeling, you don't know how you react to certain scenarios, you don't know that every negative emotion is an action signal, and you don't know the meaning of them, then you don't really know what you're feeling. So you're not getting that valuable feedback from your gut. There's a school of psychology that believes that at the unconscious level, we're plugged into something, i.e. the collective unconscious, much greater than ourselves. There's a deep kind of well of wisdom that potentially we have access to. And if that sounds woo-woo, it's only because I don't have time to kind of get into the real scientific background for some of these ideas and where some of the stuff is actually pretty serious. But, maybe that is, let's say that is a concept that is true, or let's play with it and pretend as if it is. That's what we're tapping into when we make those rapid decisions, when we make those gut decisions. And emotional intelligence, cultivating and developing emotional intelligence is what lets us do that. It's what lets us overcome uncertainty and kind of overwhelm and all of that self-sabotage, and just know what we want to do and when to do it and how to do it, and be able to take in that vast amount of data that our business is always serving up before our very eyes, make decisions, move forward, kick ass, et cetera, et cetera.
There's a great quote that I read, I don't know, many, many years ago, and it goes something along the lines of successful people make decisions quickly as soon as all the facts are available and change their minds very slowly, if ever, while failures make decisions very slowly and change them often. So being decisive is definitely a critical business skill, I would say. We've all seen the people with a paralysis of analysis that they just never get out of the starting gate. I mean, it's just, I see that with my real estate investor clients, and then like you keep track of these people and look back, years later, gosh, if you just would have made a decision 3 years ago or 5 years ago, look at how much better your life would be now. It's just, I see it over and over.
Exactly. And I think that's true for everybody. I don't know anyone for whom that's not true of, regardless of industry. Even for myself, I wish that the only regret that I've ever had about anything that I've done has been not doing it quicker. Like even some of the biggest failures I've had in my career, I just wish I had done them faster, so I could have had those great learnings, reframed all of the pain into learning experiences, and moved on faster, because acceleration is key. One of my best friends, one of my really good mentors, who's actually on the board of one of my companies, once said, there's a brilliant, eloquent quote. He just said, in business, the most certain guy in the room wins. The most certain guy in the room wins. And I think that certainty and decisiveness, it's two sides of the same coin, and that is a ability, a kind of a character trait that we want to cultivate as entrepreneurs.
But someone would say you could be certainly wrong. I mean, right? I don't know. People can be reckless, right? Right. That's the opposite side of this.
Right. But emotional intelligence is where I think emotional intelligence is the missing piece of the puzzle, right? Because I would say that people who are like live in a world where they're just certain about everything, but they're wrong about most things as well. So that person must have a terrible life, by the way. They must get into all kinds of trouble. But I would say that person probably doesn't have a huge amount of emotional intelligence. So if we cultivate emotional intelligence, which really comes down to being able to really clearly identify, particularly the negative emotions that come up in our lives, and what they are and what the meaning behind them is, what it is that our unconscious mind is seeking to change about the situation or about our behavior. If we can really start to pay attention to that stuff and come through that process and arrive at certainty on the other side, then the quality of our decision making, the quality of our certainty will be that much better for it. So that's really the point of emotional intelligence. And yeah, you're totally right. Without that, without emotional intelligence, certain is the last thing that you want to be, although that doesn't stop a bunch of people.
Right. So. It doesn't the bull in the china shop, right? Yeah, that's for sure. Well, hey, I know we're running long here, but I just got to ask you about one more thing because it's such a fascinating topic. And
I got time if you do.
Yeah. So you wrote a post about why having tons of potential can put you at a serious disadvantage. Now, most people would read that on its face and think, well, I assume you mean by potential, you mean having talents or resources or ideas. Aren't those all good things?
Well, actually, I don't mean having those things when I say having potential, because if you had those things, you would just have those things. But maybe ideas, having a lot of ideas is kind of like having a lot of potential. The point with having a lot of potential is that I think that a lot of people get comfortable. They find a lot of comfort in the thought that they have a lot of potential. So I'm always doing little experiments with my client population. I'm always kind of surveying them and sort of learning stuff about entrepreneurial traits. Because everybody asks me, they're like, and you actually are kind of unique because you haven't asked me this classic question, which I hear every day, which
what did I miss?
What are the no, seriously, I'm so bored of answering it. But it's what are the common traits amongst entrepreneurs? And they're all different because I work with people in all different industries, and so everybody's a unique, beautiful snowflake. But I always try and find out like what makes entrepreneurs the same. And I've noticed at least in my client population, there's a huge number of people who are pretty solid achievers in some area when they were young children. They, had a good like academic or sporting background maybe, or in some other part of life if it wasn't to do with school. And they always were told that they have a lot of potential. So entrepreneurs, the vast majority of my clients would get report cards from school when they were kids that would say, did pretty well, has a lot of potential. So the teachers were always basically saying the kid got like a B+ or an A, but they really could be getting an A+. They have a lot of potential. And I think that that's a really interesting statement. I think it's kind of interesting that we have this whole dialogue with young people, with children, where we tell them they have a lot of potential. Because the thing about having a lot of potential is that you're not actually using it. And I see that in entrepreneurs a lot who have a lot of potential and who derive comfort from the knowledge that if they were to really give something their all, like a business that they're working on or an idea or a product or something, then if they were to harvest every scrap of potential, then they would absolutely crush it. That's what they tell themselves because their whole life they've been told you have a lot of potential. You're hugely talented. You just need to use all of that potential. And so it becomes a bit of a psychological crutch. But the truth is, having a lot of potential is kind of like wanting to pull a little bit of cash out of your bank without really checking your balance on the ATM. It's like, don't look at it. You don't want to know how much money isn't in there. You just want to draw from it a little bit of the time. Because if you were to harvest every scrap of your potential, if you were to empty the account and invest it all into the one business, and that business didn't succeed, how would you feel about this potential that you've been told you've had your entire life? It wasn't enough. And that's the problem right there, is that I think a huge number of entrepreneurs who are familiar, and it won't be everybody, but if you're listening to this and you're familiar with this kind of you have a lot of potential narrative, if that's been a part of your life, ask yourself, is having a lot of potential, is believing that I have a lot of potential something that's allowing me to just be comfortable? Is it something that it's allowing me to really never commit to anything because it's much more comfortable to hold back a little bit and then be able to blame it. If the business doesn't work out, you can say, oh, well, it didn't work out because I didn't give it my all. I still have potential. That's the problem right there with the, why having a lot of potential is a huge mistake. I think that...
I would also think that concept of having a lot of potential, if someone has been told that or they've told themselves that in their self-talk over the years, it can create obviously a cockiness and arrogance that could be, detrimental, but it also creates this kind of someday I'll concept.
Exactly.
Where it's like, okay, look, I'm so gifted and talented and, I got so much going for me. It's really not that big a deal whether this thing works out or not. I'll just go on to the next thing. You alluded to that when you talked about the ATM example, right?
Yeah, exactly. When you're always leaving a little bit of potential in the bank, it means that you're never really on the line to make the thing that you're working on right now actually work, right? Because it's just so comfortable to believe like, well, I still have that potential tucked away for a rainy day. I'll use that someday, And I think that, frankly, it's nonsense. I think that there's people who have lived their entire lives and they've never actually tested the tank. They've never actually measured and looked and seen how much potential do I really have? How far can it actually get me? And I think a better metaphor than this ATM concept, which I think is accurate for people, by the way, but I think a better metaphor is like, what if potential was like a muscle? You use it. We know how to lift weights and build muscle. You train to failure, right? Like you lift as much as you can possibly lift, and then you go back to the gym the next week and you lift a little bit more. That's how you get stronger. Maybe you could develop your potential and thus your results as an entrepreneur that way. But to do that, you actually have to get out of that comfort zone of always leaving a part of yourself on the bench. And overcome the fear of the vulnerability of giving something your all. And that was the point of that article. That's the message that I'm trying to preach across there.
Very good point. Very good point. Well, Peter, this has been a fascinating discussion. You've got two websites that might be of interest to the listeners. Please give both of those out, if you would, and explain what the distinction is between the two.
Yeah, well, everything we've been talking about today is over at petershallard.com. That's first and foremost my home on the internet. The Shrink for Entrepreneurs. I have a blog there where I publish these kind of my attempts at being deep and meaningful about some of these concepts. And we do some awesome stuff, talk about some awesome things, and people can find out all about how to work with me as a client on that website. I have another thing. We haven't talked too much about it today, but I'm obsessed with defeating procrastination. It's been something that in the past I wrestled with a lot when I was building my business, and I've helped a huge number of clients successfully defeat it in our one-on-one work. And recently we started I built a startup dedicated to fighting the war and defeating the procrastination once and for all. So it's called Commit Action. It's over at commitaction.com. And we do some really cool stuff there. We work with the professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. We have a whole team of coaches who are kind of productivity ninjas who work with people to help them overcome procrastination and basically kick ass in life and business. And we're doing interesting stuff. We're currently running a free tutorial, a series of cool video tutorials on what we've learned about the neuroscience of defeating procrastination. And how you can kind of implement that stuff in your life right now. So all of that is available over at Commit Action. It's something that I suggest you should really go check out. Yeah, I think that for a lot of entrepreneurs, procrastination is really like the final obstacle. There's a lot of stuff that we have to learn in life and business. We've kind of been talking about this all today. You're going to have ups and downs. You're going to learn stuff. The only real magic bullet that I believe is real in business is acceleration, is moving through the learning curve of entrepreneurship faster. And the thing that stops us doing that is procrastination. So when I created Commit Action, it was because I wanted to build a tool that has the highest impact kind of value to business owners. So it's all about just defeating procrastination and literally each week having you do more stuff, move more balls forward in your life and business, so that you can hit that learning curve faster, learn from it, fill those capabilities in, grow, level up, become superhuman, all that great stuff. That's what it's about.
Fantastic. Well, that procrastination stuff, I'm going to get around to that later. Just kidding.
Exactly. Yeah. So everybody listening in, just write down that link, commitinaction.com, and like maybe in about a week when you think you're ready, start thinking about checking it out, and then put it off for another few days. I want when you arrive, I want you to be serious. So just sit on it for a while, right?
That's right. That's right. Just meditate on the whole thing for a while. I tell you, with all the salespeople I've trained over the years, especially in the real estate industry, I found that there's this mentality of smart person that they come off as though they're really going to go somewhere and do something with their career, but they have this. It's not exactly paralysis of analysis, which is sort of another affliction, but this one is, I call it the getting ready to get ready syndrome. Right. And they're always preparing. And you know that someday if they ever go out and make a presentation, which may never happen, it's going to be amazing because they're just going to have all their ducks in the row. They're going to have all the latest tools and all the greatest looking stuff and the best materials, and they're going to know exactly what to say, but they never do one.
Absolutely. I think it's people like that who keep the productivity software industry in business, right? Downloading like all of the latest to-do list apps and endless systems where you can categorize all of your best intentions and file them away so that they never actually get accomplished. So that's what we try and do, the like antithesis of that. That's kind of my focus. So it's a huge issue, that whole getting ready to get ready, and then one day you'll almost be ready. Planning, brainstorming can be a part of that as well. I think at least when people are starting new businesses, there's a fine line between creating the master plan and actually just jumping in and doing it. And I just can't talk enough about the learning curve of entrepreneurship. I think that the number one reason people get obsessed with these systems and planning and getting ready is because they're hoping to take actions that will insulate them from making mistakes and having to learn things the hard way. And then, so that's going on the one hand. And on the other hand, we look at every successful entrepreneur in the history of the planet, and they all unanimously tell us that they got spanked, they learned things the hard way, they got educated on the streets, they got beat up, they picked themselves up, they got up again, they kept on going. So that's the reality of business success from the people who have done it. But then on the other hand, there's the kind of like this urge that people just starting out have to avoid all of that. And I just encourage those folks, if you're one of them listening to this, step back, look at yourself planning and preparing to get started, and ask yourself, am I trying to avoid a learning experience? Because if you are, like, it's inevitable. Just dive into it. It's going to happen anyway. So you might as well, embrace it. You might as well do it. And if you're going to fail forward and fail quickly. And, it's so cheap to fail nowadays. Oh my goodness. The internet has lowered the cost of failure to basically zero. I know. And it's just, it's a great time to experiment with things because it's cheap to do it. Whereas in the old days, you'd have to put $100,000 into something to try it out, if not more than that, obviously. So that's a great one. Peter, this has been a wonderfully enlightening conversation, and you are the shrink for entrepreneurs. I can see that you do a lot of value. So if anyone wants to find you, of course, the websites you gave out, but you can just Google shrink for entrepreneurs and you come right up as the first result. So absolutely. Yeah, that's fascinating. Well, hey, keep up the good work, and thank you for joining us today and sharing some great insights with our listeners. Yeah, thanks for having me. And, for everybody who's listening into this, I'm super stoked that you're committing to an entrepreneurial journey. I think that I like to kind of wrap up with this thought. I think that the world is kind of heading in a lot of interesting and slightly scary places, and I'm stoked. I think that entrepreneurs are coming up with answers to some of our most pressing questions. So when we talk about this whole like overcoming the learning curve, just do it, embrace it, all that type stuff, the reason that that I, and certainly I'm probably speaking for Jason here too, are encouraging people to do this kind of stuff is we need you to do it. We need more entrepreneurs. So make it happen. Excellent point. Thanks for having me, Jason. All right. Thanks, Peter. I'm Jason Hartman, and I'd like to invite you to our very first 2-day conference in beautiful Hawaii.
Many of our attendees are making a vacation out of this event. You will learn the most innovative strategies for real estate investing available today. We have helped thousands of people invest in properties around the U.S., and we can help you do it too. So I hope you'll join us, and happy investing. Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.